Anthony wants to know, what do you think will happen to the pro-life movement if SCOTUS reaffirms Roe v. Wade with Alabama's challenge to abortion?
Then we'll keep going on. We'll keep on keeping on. This isn't the first time that this has happened. Roe v. Wade was decided in 1973. It invented a fictitious right to abortion. It didn't even say where it found the right to abortion in the Constitution. The opinion said, well, maybe it's in the 14th Amendment, maybe it's in the 9th Amendment. It doesn't matter. There's a right to an abortion in there, which is ironic because if the right to an abortion is in the 14th Amendment, then the people who wrote the 14th Amendment were unaware of that. The people who adopted the 14th Amendment were unaware of that at the time of the ratification of the 14th
You
Amendment.
mean abortion by wire hangers and back alleys didn't exist back then?
Shockingly, it did. So the first laws to deal with abortion happened in about 1821.
Mm-hmm.
The 14th Amendment comes in 40 years later. At the time, there were many states and municipalities that had laws against abortion. And actually, at the time of Roe v. Wade, at least 21 states and municipalities had those same laws on the books. And yet the Supreme Court invents the right to abortion. Then 20 years later, you get Planned Parenthood v. Casey. This is where the court reaffirmed the right to an abortion. Mm-hmm. It put certain restrictions on it. I guess in the intervening 20 years, the Constitution magically grew new restrictions on abortion. But whatever, now 20, 30 years later, if this comes up, hopefully we can overturn Roe versus Wade. I actually spoke to Antonin Scalia about this topic before he died. And I said, conservatives, we accept precedent. There's a concept in the law, stare decisis, which is that we give some deference to precedent. Mm-hmm. So how do you square your belief in precedent with overturning Roe versus Wade? And what he said is that some rulings are so egregious that they must be overturned. Dred Scott would be an example of this.
Perfect example.
Ruling that black people cannot be American citizens. You can't gradually, incrementally change that. You got to overturn it. Roe versus Wade, same thing. You can't coherently say, we're going to protect babies at 28 weeks, but we're going to kill them at 24 weeks. It doesn't make any sense. You have to overturn it, and if the court doesn't have the guts to do it this time, guess what we're going to do? We're going to keep on passing laws. We're going to keep on fighting. Public opinion is moving in our direction, and we'll get them the next time.
It's interesting because I think the argument that you're seeing from many on the left is that, oh no, Donald Trump has stacked the courts and they're going to overturn Roe v. Wade. Honestly, I don't know that as a pro-lifer that I can count on Justice Kavanaugh or Chief Justice Roberts to make the pro-life, pro-constitution decision in this case.
Well, this is what they said in Planned Parenthood v. Casey. This was 1992. So that you just had a decade of the Reagan administration, the Bush administration, stacking the courts. And what happened? 3 justices appointed by Republicans, Anthony Kennedy, David Souter, Sandra Day O'Connor, all voted to uphold the fictional right to abortion. This happens a lot. The Supreme Court justices disappoint their presidents often, and can we really count on John Roberts? I don't. It seems like we can't. Can we count on Kavanaugh? Jury's still out, but I'm worried.
All right. Arun says, Dear Dr. Kofefe, I've been a victim of affirmative action, often due to being an Indian American. Any advice on how we conservatives can subvert discriminatory policies in the university and workplace?
Well, actually, speaking of the Supreme Court, this decision probably is going to be handled by them pretty soon because you've got this case coming up about discrimination against Asian students at Harvard. So affirmative action also was upheld thanks to Sandra Day O'Connor and other justices. And what the court said at that time, the last time they really dealt with this, is eventually affirmative action will not be necessary. Eventually we can phase it out. The question is now, can we phase it out? Because affirmative action, maybe it's really helpful to black students applying to Harvard, but you can't help some students without hurting other students.
Like Asians and Indian Americans.
Like Asians and Indians, right. So if it's going to hurt those students, they have a real discrimination case. And unfortunately, a lot of these questions now are being decided by the Supreme Court. And the reason they're being decided by the Supreme Court is because the Supreme Court has taken on that power. The legislature has not wanted to do its job. It's brought these questions to the court, and unfortunately the court has invented fictional rights over the years. And when you're basing your decisions on those precedents, you have to invent more fictional rights, or you have to read new interpretations into these fictional rights. And so I'm hoping that this court, which for all of their flaws has been much more seriously minded, has been much more respectful of the Constitution in recent years, hopefully this court will at least issue some legal and constitutional clarity and get rid of some of these issues that have caused so much trouble over the last several decades.